Right, I think we are now live. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Rabbi Eisenberg. How are you
Good
this
evening.
week?
How are you? Nice to see you.
Nice to have you back with us.
Nice to be back, even though it took a lot longer than I thought it would.
It's always good to be home, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Rabbi, I feel like a lot's happened since we last did one of these and we last spoke, and I think there's been a lot of chicken soup, liters and
Yeah,
liters of it since then.
absolutely.
I believe it's been a roaring success. Tell us a bit about it.
Well, it was a clucking success, actually, but yeah. Um, really, it was an idea that some of the people within the executive had. I can't take any credit for the idea. They'd seen it somewhere else, and they'd seen that people came to shul were being invited to have chicken soup and making a bit of a chicken soup kiddush after davening. And so that's what we were asked, would we consider doing it? We said, yeah, of course we consider doing it. We got right onto it, and we made the soup and we made the knedlach. And I do feel we had the conversation, you and I, about how we should do it and who should make the soup. And I do believe that there's a big difference between when the soup's catered or when the soup's homemade. So we've gone with that for now. We did it last week, first time this week, a second time this week. We had a lot more people also because of the children's service. So we had even more people. And I think it was, I think it was great. It was really, really good to see a lot of people being willing to come back. A few people told me they came back because of chicken soup. And I think the point is if we can start getting people to come back and to feel comfortable for coming back, or to be able to come back to shul and not feel that this is a dangerous space, and rather feel it's a space they can come back to daven, to be inspired, but also to have be social. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a win-win situation.
So you're offering chicken soup for the soul and also chicken soup at the same time. It all
Correct.
makes everything
It all
better.
goes together. And thank you very much to the people in the exec that brought this forward. I didn't think it would make much of a difference, but I think I have seen a significant rise in the numbers on Friday night since we've done it. We certainly had a lot of women have come who don't normally come to the Friday night, and we've had that. So that's definitely seen a rise in numbers. But I think even amongst the gentlemen, we've had
Well, please God, then the blessing I should give us all is that should be the only rise in numbers that we see.
absolutely. Amen.
Amen. Right, onwards.
Onwards
Nicely
and
lead,
upwards.
nicely leads us on to. So Adam Patrick has commented here. Hello, Adam, as always.
Hi,
Adam
Adam from the Friendship Circle.
Adam never misses a thing, but I think what Adam also is trying to tell us today is that the friendship circle were extremely busy working on Mitzvah Day activities all day. They were down at, I think, Lubavitch HQ on Singleton Road, and they were collecting, in conjunction with our shul and other places as well, they were collecting lots of items that are being packaged up to be distributed to the poor and the homeless. And I know that those are already on their way out there tonight. It's an extremely cold night.
It's very cold.
And those items that hopefully will keep people that are sleeping rough, that will keep them warm, those are going to reach people already today, which is fantastic. So thank you to everybody that volunteered. Thank you to Adam as well. I think it's a great effort that they've done. And they do that every year to mark Mitzvah Day. And so we wanted to talk about Mitzvah Day because it's not a brand new concept, but it's a relatively new concept in as much as it's and I said to you last week that I felt that perhaps Mitzvah Day as a concept was more for the outside world rather than the inside world, if you like. It's
It
not
could very well be. I didn't. I should have done a bit more research on the emergence of Mitzvah Day and how Mitzvah Day became to be what it is. Didn't have the chance. I was last week, as you said, I was away in Israel, and then I had a bit of a traumatic way back. I've not had the chance today to actually check up on that. Adam has been a superstar today. Worked so hard. Adam, you are famous.
Adam. Well done.
Absolutely. We, two thumbs up for Adam.
4 even. So that's great. So this concept of what is a mitzvah, maybe we should get into that because if you were to ask a Jewish person what a mitzvah is, over the years, the meaning of a mitzvah has come to be seen as a good deed, effectively, rather than a commandment, which is what it is. Now, a commandment is something that you are told to do or instructed to do, and a good deed feels like something that comes from the heart and you feel you have to do. So there's that kind of balance, isn't there?
Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult one. I mean, we can discuss about getting to the point where you feel you have to do your mitzvahs as well, but I think that's not on a basic level that's not really what the mitzvah is all about. So the idea being that HaKadosh Baruch Hu given us our life in this world and said, I'm giving you life in this world. During the time that you have in this world, I want you to do certain things and to keep away from other things. Those are mitzvahs. All these are known as mitzvahs. You have the positive mitzvahs, which is mitzvahs aseh, aseh as in do, and mitzvahs los aseh means do not do. So don't eat pork. That's a mitzvah los aseh. Shellfish. Don't turn on a light on Shabbos. All those things are prohibitions. Then additionally to that, you also have a mitzvah aseh. So make a sukkah, wear tefillin, wear tzitzis, put up a mezuzah. Those are positive mitzvahs. Now, those, if you were to look at those as the ones that I mentioned until now, very few people will actually define those as good deeds. Because in reality, is it really a good deed to wear tzitzis? Or is it really a good deed to put a mezuzah on your doorfront? So it'll depend how you define good deeds. I could maybe define it in a way where it would be. But I don't think that's what people mean when they think of mitzvah. So they're thinking more of give charity, lend money to somebody that's desperate for money, help somebody who's homeless, that when they're sleeping rough, that they shouldn't be freezing cold at night, give them mittens, give them hats, give them blankets, whatever else it is. All those things, they become more synonymous with mitzvah than the other things that I mentioned to you before.
And I think that's it. I think when it sort of feels like the concept of a mitzvah is not necessarily now the concept that we have, or the common concept of a mitzvah is something that's not exclusive to Judaism. It sort of repeats itself in all the Abrahamic faiths, if you like, and even some of the non-Abrahamic faiths. It just feels like it's a decent thing to do. Good deeds in general, it's a good way to live your life. That if you treat other people the way that you want to be treated, we're all going to get on a lot better. And in basics, I think that's why this idea of a mitzvah is perhaps seen by people that try and promote things like Mitzvah Day as being the basic DNA of Judaism. So at its core, we're a very sort of kind, warm, and giving religion. That we want to support people even beyond the fringes of our community. We see ourselves as trying to be a force for good in the world as a whole. And I think that's why Mitzvah Day is actually quite a nice concept in many ways, because it distills down the things that are good about, because you get lost in all the positive commandments and negative commandments. There's a lot in there, as you say, that are not relatable in say necessarily a modern day and age, although we as Jewish people understand the roots of it and it's important to us. Like you say, nobody else is going to understand some of the mitzvahs that we carry out. But there are so many of them that we're spoiled for choice, really, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, we are on the one hand. On the other hand, the truth is that even though there's 613 mitzvahs, the Chofetz Chaim actually wrote a book called the Sefer Mitzvahs HaKatzar, the short variation, the short book of the mitzvahs, and in it actually he wrote there are only about 75 to 80 mitzvahs that apply nowadays, and a great majority of the mitzvahs don't apply anymore. All the mitzvahs had to do with the temple. A lot of the mitzvahs had to do with Eretz Yisrael. A lot of them don't apply anymore the way they did used to apply then. So we're missing a huge chunk of the mitzvahs that we were able to do, and we're only left with a small remnant of what it used to be.
So how do you feel that? I mean, we originally spoke about Mitzvah Day, and I know that there are some people that have views that what do we need another day for, if you like, out of the calendar, and shouldn't every day be a mitzvah day, as opposed to when you make it one day, does it really send across the message that we want? How important do you think it is for us to give that message to the outside world?
So it's interesting. So yeah, I often think about these ideas of having a day for. Like, I don't know. I'll ask you the question. I don't know how you felt about this. How did you feel as a child about Mother's Day or Father's Day? Did it make any difference the day after Mother's Day how you treated your mom?
So we never had it really in our house. It just wasn't a thing. We never particularly celebrated it. And no, my mum, she's probably watching tonight, so I should be careful what I say. But my mum is from a
Say
Sephardi
hi,
house.
mom, first of all.
My mum is a Sephardi lady from the Middle East originally, and so if you don't give your parents respect, you'll find out about it soon enough. And so really, that I think that is such a positive commandment anyway, that you have to honor your father and mother. That's kind of something that you have to take into everyday life, and it's not just for one day. So yeah, we sorry to digress, but no, we didn't do one-off days. We didn't do Valentine's Day. We didn't do all these sort of days, which I think
I know, but even
conveniently
for the people that do those days, do you find after Valentine's Day that people treat their spouses better? Do you find after Father's Day or Mother's Day that there's like a resurgence of kibbutz avayim for a week or something like that?
well, let's take
Or does it
something
just
more.
mean that like has it become? It's a lot of this has become almost like commercialized. So it's like Valentine's Day, you
It
gotta
is.
buy flowers. It's Mother's Day, you gotta buy flowers. It's Father's Day, you gotta find some kind of technical gadget that he doesn't have yet and spend 300 quid on them. But nobody really speaks about. I think Father's Day has lost the idea. We've lost the idea of kibbutz avayim in this whole thing, haven't we?
I think, yeah, look, I think yeah, these things are, let's face it, most of these days, not mitzvah day necessarily, because I don't think there's any money in it for anybody unless it's sort of lottery funded or something like that. But I don't think that that these other days, Valentine's Day, you mentioned, Father's Day, Mother's Day, whichever day, it's all big commercial business for the people that sell greetings
Even
cards and
Thanksgiving. Even
yeah, and
Thanksgiving, which
Thanksgiving in
Thanksgiving
America,
used to
yeah.
be a wonderful tradition, I think. That the fact that the whoever they were, the pilgrims, whatever they were called, not the pilgrims, the Puritans, who made their way to America, were, gave thanks for whatever it was, for the harvest or for whatever they had, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's not a turkey's fault that they landed in America.
No,
They
the
had all the
turkeys always.
turkeys.
I don't know why, but the turkeys always seem to get it at this time of the year. But I think it's true to a certain extent what you say, that a lot of these days are so commercialized. So, for instance, when I was growing up, even amongst because we have Purim every year, so Purim is our time for dressing up. In the States, Halloween was always the big thing, not necessarily amongst Jewish people, but particularly for Gentile people. And I think here in this country, growing up, I don't remember Halloween being anywhere near as big as it is today. Now you can't walk into Sainsbury's without big Halloween displays and so on. And it's because all of these days are an opportunity for commercialization. And think about Thanksgiving. Yes, that is a big day in America for commercialization, but you've also got what is coming up very shortly, what they refer to as Black Friday, which is the
The day after
pinnacle.
Thanksgiving, basically.
Yeah, it's a crazy pinnacle of commercialization, because if you think about it, you've then got they have Christmas afterwards, and Christmas people need to buy presents again. So
Yeah.
it's like
They
this
can use
is
the
like
Black
the
Friday sales to buy stuff for Christmas. Do you not think so?
I would say so. That's that. Now you're thinking with the Yiddish cop. That's the way to do a Black Friday sale.
That's how
Yeah.
Martin Lewis taught me how to buy my Christmas presents.
Well, I think it's a good idea, but let's face it, the November and December at the moment are like the golden months. This is like having Pesach for them.
It's the
It's a
gold
great
months of
time.
retail, I would have guessed, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it traditionally used to be, and certainly in terms of online retail, that seems to
Yeah.
be alive and well. But going back to these one-day events, you're right. Sometimes they do get a bit carried away, and we discussed this last week or a couple of weeks ago. when we were discussing other one-off days and if they do these concepts justice. But to go back to Mitzvah Day for a second, when you've got massive efforts on one day like this, so let's take, for instance, the monumental efforts of the Friendship Circle today to gather up the items that they have, and also I believe Esti's on her way out there now to deliver these things to
Thank
people.
You, Esti, for the work that you've done, by the way.
Just tremendous work. I think she's been on her feet all day schlepping. But when those items reach the people that get them, does it make it pay off if they know that it's come from Jewish people that have devoted their time to do a mitzvah, or should a mitzvah be completely anonymous? Is it more meaningful if they don't even know?
So there's two things to be discussed over here, I think. That's number one is the mitzvah of tzedakah, how is tzedakah more meaningful? But number two, in the scheme of Mitzvah Day, how do we look at things? So you just said Mitzvah Day is a day where we really want to show the outside world what it means to do a mitzvah, a good deed in this instance, that we are not as insular as we sometimes might seem, that we're very much an outward-looking people that are willing not only to look inwards and help ourselves, but look outwards and help others. And I think in that context, if the point of Mitzvah Day, again, I'm saying if the point of Mitzvah Day is to ensure that people realize that we as Jewish people are a giving nation that is willing to give beyond our borders, if nobody knows where it's come from, what's the point? Then you miss the whole point of Mitzvah Day. If Mitzvah Day is really there to galvanize the community, to be willing to go out and do positive things and to make a positive change in the world, regardless of whether people are or not aware that change has come about through Jewish people, well, then there's no waste whatsoever. So it really sort of depends on how you spin it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that the question is, have you ever looked on the website? How do they define Mitzvah Day?
Let's have a look now. Let's do this live. Let's have a look.
Let's do the Google Live.
Mitzvah Day. Here we go. So, home. Mitzvah Day is the UK's largest faith-led day of social action. Each year in November, over 40,000 people around the world come together to give our time, not money. So it's time, not money, to make a difference to the community around us. Mitzvah Day introduces people to social action, to their neighbors, and to local charities, setting up projects which address real needs. Jewish-led, we bring together people of all ages, faiths, and backgrounds to volunteer side by side, building long-standing, genuine relationships. Social action projects make a vital difference to the world around us and can include a wide variety of activities. Mitzvah Day projects offer a range of art and craft activities such as making dog toys for animal rescue centers, eco projects such as tree planting, litter picks, friendship projects such as visiting care homes, collection projects such as food collections for local food banks, clothing collections, stationery collections, appreciation projects such as writing letters to hospital workers, support staff, fire service workers, members of the executive, cooking projects to make food to be donated to night shelters and refuge centers, upcycling projects and care projects such as making and distributing essential supplies to rough sleepers. And so that kind of covers a range, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I think here the point is that a mitzvah is being defined as social action.
Yeah.
And I guess, where the argument will start to be when you start having the discussion with people.
I've got it. We're using the wrong word. It should be Chesed Day. That's what social action really is in a nutshell.
I guess so, because when I think mitzvah, I don't necessarily think litter pick. I don't know about you. If I were to ask you, what's the first mitzvah that comes to mind? So people have their favorite mitzvah, but I just don't think of litter pick or making dog toys. Whilst those are lovely projects of social action, I think mitzvah sort of, you're taking the term mitzvah and you're stretching it. And the
Yeah.
problem with stretching the term mitzvah is, what message are you giving not to the outside, but people on the inside? See, the problem is we nowadays live in a society with so many Jews that are so estranged from their culture and so estranged from their heritage that they don't really know what's what. And so you say to them, this is a mitzvah. Oh, all right. A mitzvah is picking up litter. Or a mitzvah is, because that's what I always did. You know, the only time I heard of the word mitzvah is when I got together mitzvah day with some Muslims and some Christians, and we went through the local park picking up Bisleys. You know, but that's, and Catholic focus or whatever else it is.
It certainly can't help. It certainly can't hurt these sort of actions, though. I think,
No,
but
I think that's the
I think you're
important
right. I think maybe what to put it maybe a different way is that there's a lot of, well, there's 613 of them altogether. There's a lot to take on. Even if you were to bring that down to 75, it's still a lot. And I think if you talk to people that are, when people say that they're converting, and some of the first things that people say to those people is, "You're crazy. Why do you want to take on all these restrictions?" Because let's face it, religion, not just our religion, it does restrict you to a certain moral code. So there's certain things you can do.
I would say our religion is more restrictive than almost any other religion out there.
I would say so.
I would venture to say certainly of the big three, we're the most restrictive. I don't think that either Islam and certainly not Christianity are nowhere near as restrictive in their practices as Judaism is.
Yeah, well, maybe. I'm sorry to say, I probably don't know enough about very religious Muslims or very religious Christian people. I don't know enough about their orthodoxy, but I imagine that they have stringencies as well. But let's just take it that we always say, look, why would you want to take all of that on? So maybe there's a propensity for people to turn around and say, well, in actual fact, I'm not going to take all those 75 things on. I'm certainly not going to take on 613, but I do good things, so that's enough to tick that box, kind of thing. We distill it down all to kind of a generalization of the good acts, rather than the other bits and pieces that people don't want to do because maybe they're too much hassle.
Yes, I think the issue with that then becomes basically is that the mitzvah has been diluted from really doing God's word to doing, in this instance, David's word or whoever it is that's out there. So if somebody says, look, Shabbos is too difficult for me, and matzah on Pesach and all this hummus thing and fasting on Yom Kippur, come on, that's just too difficult. I'm quite happy to pick up litter. But even when you pick, the problem is that even those people that are, that are busy picking up litter or giving away charity to food banks, I keep on picking on the litter. Sorry, so about giving charity to homeless people and giving money or giving clothing to people that are really desperate. Even when you're doing that, you're not doing it because God said so. You're doing it because in your heart you feel that's the right thing, and therefore, mitzvah becomes really defined by what? It's not something defined by God, and I think that's part of where the issue lies. Is if I start to take away this idea of mitzvah and say, because I don't think people are saying, God, I don't like these mitzvahs, but I like this mitzvah. They're not looking at God at all. They say, God, your whole Torah is worthless. We're not really that interested. But what I'd like to take on is the things that speak to me. So what speaks to me? Social action speaks to me. Whatever it is within it. So and it loses this idea because mitzvah, as you said, the word mitzvah, part of the word, there's the different translations within it. The word of mitzvah comes from the word tzivui. Tzivui means commandment. Okay? So mitzvah is the person who commanded us. And if mitzvah means commandment, so that means I'm doing it because God asked me to do it, not because it feels good for me to do it.
But you know what though? See, okay, so but then to flip that coin, the other side of it is that there is a part of me that feels that when it does come from you, it's defined by you, as you say. it might not necessarily talk about your relationship with God, but it does talk about your relationship with your fellow man. And so for instance, let's say somebody needs tzedakah. Is it more meaningful when you know the person needs tzedakah and you offer to help them? Or is it more meaningful when they need tzedakah and they come and they beg for it or they ask for it? So to me, I would say a good deed is always more meaningful when you don't have to be prompted, when it comes from the heart, and when you know it just feels like the right thing to do, and so you go and do it.
So I agree with that. It's definitely a greater level of tzedakah if you give without being asked to give, rather than having to be cajoled and coaxed into giving money, certainly. But on the other hand, if we end up with that paradigm that mitzvahs are only the things that I am interested in doing, you end up with something that's not, you end up sort of twisting the whole concept of the idea of what God had in mind with his mitzvah to say, look, this is what I want to do, so this is what I'm going to do. And it happens to be that it, fits quite nicely with God's agenda anyway, so I'll call it a mitzvah. Do you know what I mean? But I'm not doing it because it's a
I like
mitzvah.
that. It fits nicely with God's agenda. Yeah, but that's true.
Because it's my agenda, and God happens to agree with me on this one. Okay? But I have another agenda next week on Shabbos that God doesn't agree with so much. That's called United, or that's called City, or whatever you support. And then my agenda and the mitzvah will be at odds with each other. And so I think that's I guess part of the issue, in that defining mitzvah that way, as in social action. What you've really done is you've appealed to people. I think everybody believes in social action one way or another. And some people are a little bit more outgoing in the social action, so they'll think of the homeless people that live in town. It's horrible. When you walk down Market Street and you see those people under the bridge, by the Arndale Center, as you go past Marks and Spencer, and then you go over the Metrolink lines, and then there's that bridge over, what I'm talking about, where the NatWest is? NatWest Boots.
Yeah, more or less. Yes.
So there's a whole bunch of people that sleep rough over there. Whenever you pass by, and whenever I see them, I feel terrible. To me, it's just so sad to see people that are so desperate in life that, they don't even have a roof over their head. They need to literally sleep under the bridge. Literally.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question then. Not all of us are. So let's say some of us have chosen to live our life in a way that we pick and choose which mitzvahs we want to honor, if you like, yeah,
right,
and which we find too difficult. And I know that I'm asking an Orthodox rabbi now for an opinion, and the opinion should be, you don't get to make that choice, pal. You should keep them all.
Okay, but keep going.
I get that, but let's just say we wanted to be more specific. Are there certain mitzvahs that are more important than others? If is there a hierarchy in mitzvahs, or is the mitzvah to wear tzitzis for a man as important as, say, giving charity? Is having a mezuzah on your home as important as helping the elderly?
So there is a hierarchy. It's hard to define that hierarchy. I would say as follows: as far as prohibitions go, there is a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is defined by the punishment that comes with the prohibition. So there's certain prohibitions that bring with them no punishment, certain brings lashes, certain of them even would bring a death penalty. Again, none of these apply, and even in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, when they did apply, it was extremely hard for anybody to get that kind of punishment. It was very, very hard for all of the different factors to come together perfectly for anybody to get that. And so the Gemara says that, the Mishnah says, either once in 7 or once in 70 years, any Sanhedrin that had a death penalty once in 7 or once in 70 years was considered a Sanhedrin of killers. Which goes to show you that compare that to the hundreds of people on death row in America, sitting and waiting for months and years, till one day somebody knocks on your door and says, "Hey, Bobby, it's your turn," right? So it's not. It was very, very different. So that's the hierarchy as far as that goes. I think in mitzvahs and positive mitzvahs, it's hard to give a hierarchy. I think we don't really know that. Pirkei Avos tells us we don't really know the reward for mitzvahs or not doing mitzvahs. But I think there's certain mitzvahs that would go above that. So, for example, the mitzvah of emunah in God, I would say, certain mitzvahs have a higher, they just to me have a higher value over, for example, I don't know, wearing tzitzis. Wearing tzitzis and one example like that, wearing tzitzis is a mitzvah that's called kiyumis. That means there's mitzvah chiyumis and mitzvah kiyumis. There are certain mitzvahs that you have to do, and certain mitzvahs you only do if it presents itself. So let's say, for example, my kids live in my house. They don't have the mitzvah of mezuzah. I own a house together with my wife, and the two of us, we have the mitzvah of mezuzah to put mezuzahs on the doors of our household. My kids, at the moment, don't own a house yet. Please God, they'll either be renting or they'll be owning when they get married and have their own household. So they'll have to put a mezuzah on their door because it's now their household. Okay, but until they own a house, they don't have a mitzvah to do that. Whereas the mitzvah of, I don't know, the mitzvah of tzitzis even is like that. There are many that are of the opinion that a mitzvah of tzitzis is only if you're wearing a four-cornered garment, you must put tzitzis on it. Many of us don't wear four-cornered garments, and therefore we say, well, then there's no mitzvah of tzitzis anyway. Because I'm not wearing anything that has four corners, really. I don't know about you, but none of my clothes have four corners. And so therefore, there are those that say, well, then as long as you're not wearing anything with four corners, you have to put on tzitzis. Tefillin, you have to do every day. Davening, you'd have to do every day. There's certain things that are obligatory as opposed to mitzvahs that as and when the opportunity presents itself, that's when you have to do the mitzvah. So there is that difference also. And I would say that the mitzvahs that are daily, and there's some mitzvahs that are not only daily, but they're constant. So those mitzvahs are obviously more important. The more constant something is, the more important it must be.
So let me turn this around now, and I'm going to try and make you argue for a mitzvah day now. Let's imagine I said to you, Rabbi, there is no mitzvah day, but Rabbi, I've decided that Shrubbery Shul needs to do something to show the outside world that Jewish people are capable of goodness. And I've chosen one day. It's a Sunday in November. We want to choose that day to get our message across to the world that we are capable of doing good things and that we're capable of being a positive force for good. What would you choose to fill that mitzvah day with? So I agree with you. It's not the same mitzvah day that we should be living every other day of the year. 364 days of the year. Those are our mitzvah days. Today is the one that I want to go and demonstrate to the non-Jewish public. These are the Torah values that we hold. What would you fill that day with?
I think
not
the mitzvah days is being filled with, I think, are very, very good, very, very good examples. But I think what I would make almost a must within mitzvah day is for the non-Jewish world to know what I'm doing. Not because I want to get kudos for it. Not because I'm sort of like, you need to know how good I am. But if the point is to teach the outside world that we as Jews are outwardly thinking and not only inwardly thinking, if we don't publicize it, then that's what it is. I remember we've had these discussions often about shul. We can have the greatest stuff going on in our shul, but if we don't tell even the Jewish Telegraph or the Hamodia or Jewish Weekly or whatever, whatever it is, if we don't let the rest of the world hear about our shul, then everyone's like, well, there's nothing going on in Shrubs, even though we could have the best vibe in the world. And so I think the marketing of it is important. If it's a day of social action and a day of, I don't know, I would go back to that definition. I'm not even sure if in the definition that we just saw, did it say show the world that's what we're all about?
Let's have a look here.
Let's go back to the definition.
All right, back to it. So we make a difference to the community around us. Mitzvah Day introduces people to social action, to their neighbors, to local charities, setting a project which address real needs. It's Jewish led, but it doesn't say anything necessarily about Jewish values.
No, and I don't think that's the other thing. So I don't really think it is so much about Jewish values. It's about teaching people about social action. I think the other thing it says we're building long.
Hang on. I'm sorry, but I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna read you all a little bit more. The rabbi can have a break for a second whilst I read this out. But They go into further detail on the About Us page, and they say that our vision, guided by the Jewish values of Tikkun Olam, which is loosely repairing the world, Gemilut Chasadim, acts of kindness, and Tzedek, justice. Our vision is of Jews and non-Jews coming together to build more cohesive neighborhoods and to strengthen civil society. Our values, Mitzvah Day, is rooted in Jewish values that underpin our projects and partnerships, so that they have a real lasting impact. It sort of breaks down after that. They go into a bit more detail about Tikkun
Yeah, I'm reading
Olam.
it now with you.
So they said that the Hebrew translates as a repairing or perfecting of the world to instill a shared responsibility in the welfare of society at large, helping others, looking after our environment, and addressing diverse human rights.
I'm not sure that's what Tikkun Olam is. That's a more.
It's
That's a
not the
very.
It's not the Hasidic
It's a
definition.
very humanistic translation. But go on.
Gemilas Chasadim. So the Hebrew literally means acts of loving kindness, which knows no bounds and not only teaches the art of giving, but also not to expect to receive something material in return. Acts of kindness are engraved in the Jewish way of life where individuals give selflessly of their time and of themselves. Every year on Mitzvah Day, thousands do just that through projects based on the principle of doing acts of kindness. Tzedek, the Hebrew translates as righteousness and justice, and can manifest itself through social action and acts of loving kindness, not because it feels good, but because the Jewish faith commands that it is the right thing to do. So there you go. There's a bit of commandment in there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. It's
So,
interesting because if you were to ask me to define Tikkun Olam, Gemilut Chasadim, or Tzedek, I would take elements of what they've written. But I do, when you read it, and that's, I guess, part of the argument on some of the sides. As you read these values, they very strongly strike you as written by someone who has a more conservative, reformer, humanistic outlook in life rather than a more orthodox in life.
so how would you redefine it then if you were looking at it from a sort of more orthodox view? Because let's take them one by one if you don't mind. Let's just take Tikkun Olam, which I know is a difficult thing, and it's very often it's used really as a slogan for a lot of people nowadays. But that's a Hasidic definition, or
Yeah, but I think of Tikkun, when I think of Tikkun Olam, I think more of the word Tikkun Olam as it comes up in Aleinu every single day, 3 times a day. So we say, Lesakin ha'olam memalchu shakai, to fix the world up with God's name, with God's kingdom. V'chol b'nei basar, and all flesh yikru b'shemecha. So Tikkun Olam is really the fact that the world realizes and recognizes the one God and his sovereignty over the world. Not so much that we all try to have a shared responsibility in the welfare of society at large. That's not really what Tikkun Olam is all about. Tikkun Olam, is now being defined differently. And again, as I said, much more, much less religiously and much more in a humanistic way. Tikkun Olam, let's make the world a perfect place. So if we're all nice to each other, then the world will be a perfect place for all of us.
And Gemilas Chasadim, which is something that, again, these are basic concepts that they teach children at school, because this is the nicer side of things. Anybody can do it. That they've got pretty much nailed down, right? That's more or less correct.
A lot of it, yeah. But I think what I would say is that within Gemilas Chasadim, if we're pushing for Gemilas Chasadim, we can push for Gemilas Chasadim anywhere. Then go and help in a Jewish nursing home. You don't have to go and help in and some of the things that are being brought over there are not really part of Gemilas Chasadim. Like, it's nice to help dogs in a dog shelter, but if I were to put things at levels of Gemilas Chasadim, as much as I'm not against dogs. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of dogs, but I'm not against dogs at all. I think they're nice, wonderful animals that people have as pets. But if I'm looking at Gemilas Chasadim, that's not where my Gemilas Chasadim is. It's not at pets, and I would even say it's not even at it's nice to clean up a park. It's lovely, But to me, if you were to ask me, Ramai, come up with a chesed project for our shul.
So that's what I'm
Let's
saying to
come
you.
up with
What
a
do you
chesed
pick?
project for our shul.
You
I'd love
pick
to
me
hear.
one thing.
Give me one thing.
Give me
I think the
one
most
thing.
the nicest chesed projects that we've done have always involved the kids doing things for the elderly. That's always been the nicest chesed projects that we've had. When we've done it for Mishloach Manot, when we've done it before Rosh Hashanah in COVID, and we dropped off hundreds of packages by different people, and people really felt cared for, and people felt loved by the community, and people felt they were part of a community that really it made a difference. To me, that's much more Gemilas Chasadim than the other things, which again, they're lovely ideas of social justice, but they're not the Jewish idea of Gemilas Chasadim. And that's part of it. So mitzvah is how God defines it, not how I feel about it. So chesed is looking at how God wants me to do chesed and doing that chesed, not finding a feel-good type of chesed and going out there and saying, this feels right, this feels nice, let me make stuff for dogs in a shelter.
And tzedek has been thrown in there for good measure, but that's justice, or you might even say equality in some ways. I don't know if that's
Right. So even that's interesting, because on the one hand, there's equality in law, in Jewish law, and we'll talk about this later. You and I will have a conversation about this, about equality in Jewish law or not, because we have something to discuss with you about that. But whilst on the one hand, everyone is equal, and we all like to say we feel that everyone is equal, but I think even in our society, not everyone is equal. There've been just recently, there've been comedians that have made jokes about people, from certain what are they called? Special characteristics or defined characteristics, and basically that person has been more or less become a persona non grata in all of Hollywood. He's literally been thrown on the street. Somebody who's had a career for 20, 25 years. She'll say, well, everybody's equal, and everybody, so if he's equal, I'm allowed to have a. So you say, well, you don't have the view that everyone's equal. But within Torah, not everyone is equal, because, if you've done something wrong, then there is a punishment for what you've done wrong. And if the lifestyle that you lead is something that's not correct, then justice demands not for me to condone it, but justice demands for me to condemn it. And I think we believe that in our society as well. We condemn things that are wrong. And I think, therefore, to say tzedek means equality, it doesn't mean equality. Because if a guy is a ganav, then he's a ganav. Then he doesn't deserve equality. If a guy is a murderer, he doesn't deserve that right of equality. And so tzedek is being hijacked over here to sound nice and all-inclusive, when we all, even secular society, doesn't believe in inclusivity as far as justice is concerned.
Okay.
We don't believe that the murderer has the same rights as everybody else. Otherwise, we wouldn't stick him behind bars.
No, 100. Morally, that feels entirely correct. That they're entitled to some, I suppose, some sort of rights, but maybe not the same as everybody else who hasn't committed that sort of crime. But different justice systems work differently. But the basic tenets of if you were trying to explain to a child what justice is, you would end up having a conversation about equality at the end of the day. So you would, because children see things.
I would
Children have a concept of
rather than
justice.
equality. I don't like the word equality.
Okay, so let's take equality out of the equation. Let me tell you something else. Then,
I use fairness. No, can we use fairness?
Okay, fairness. Yeah.
I think I'm saying fairness instead of equality, but I'm happy to go with that definition. Instead of things being fair.
Yeah, fair.
But even then, life's not fair to all of us. It's nice, it's a nice idea, but we haven't all been gifted with the same things.
Okay, but that in so much as we have control over certain elements of our lives socially, so as a society, we have certain controls and measures in there to ensure that life is more fair, so that you are treated fairly. You have a fair chance, and that nobody is discriminated against. It's not necessarily about equality, but it is about fairness. Yeah, I think children have a very good concept of what's not fair and what's fair.
Yes, we get not fair all the time, don't we?
All the time, it's not fair. And one of the things you will hear me say the most is life isn't fair, and it just isn't. And there's no way to put it. It doesn't happen because because it should be right. The world makes it right. There's no big fuss about that here. But let me ask you another question then. It's interesting because I asked you about mitzvahs, if there could be a sort of a hierarchy, if you like, and you said to me, well, actually, I can tell you the things that you shouldn't be doing because we know what the punishments are. So the more the punishment, the more that you shouldn't do it. In terms of rewards, are all mitzvahs assessed equally, or is there one magic mitzvah that gets me to the big guy upstairs quicker?
So there's an interesting question, and the answer to that question is that we don't really know what the reward of mitzvahs is, and I think everybody will get different rewards for different mitzvahs. So I don't know. Let's take two guys, right? One of them is really, really lazy. He finds getting out of bed in the morning an absolute chore, and it's just really, really hard for him. The other guy's an early bird, and they both come to shul in the morning, and they both show up on time. Or the early bird even comes there earlier. He's there 10 minutes before davening. The lazy fellow, or the fellow that has a harder time getting out of bed, comes 5 or 10 minutes late. Who gets a greater reward for coming to davening? Well, you might say, well, look, this guy came 10 minutes before davening, so he obviously did a better job at showing up before davening. But you could look at the other fellow and you could say, well, this guy has a really hard time getting out of bed in the morning. The fact that he makes it to davening at all is much more commendable than the other guy. That's a early morning bird. That you just get.
So to take that analogy and apply it for a second to tzedakah, if I don't have a lot of money and I give tzedakah, and you have a lot of money and you give tzedakah, you're going to find it easier to give it. But for me,
that's the interesting thing, actually.
It's hard. So go on.
That's an interesting thing.
It's not fair.
I was speaking to somebody about it today, and strangely enough, he told me that he spoke to somebody who's very wealthy, and he says, the wealthier I became, the harder I found it to part with my money. That's what. It's very interesting. And I don't know why it is. I'm not sure why this is, but that's what this fellow said. It could be that that's his own experience, and that's not an experience across the board. I can't tell you, Baruch Hashem, I've never really been poor and I've never really been wealthy. I've always been somewhere.
Well, I was just about to say, please God, I should be tested in such a way that I should know how difficult it is to give it away.
A lot of people say that, but I've been told wealth is a very, very difficult test. People say it's not a test that you want to be tested with, because wealth is hard. It brings with it all sorts of challenges.
It does, because
a lot of challenge.
Yeah, because very often and this is in general, this is definitely not just our society, but those who have got the money tend to be in positions of importance or positions of power, and they have more of a say. And power, if money sort of it corrupts you, or you get drunk on that whole success, power definitely does, and people get carried away with it, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's not the only downside in having money. I know there's a lot of people that having money. We spent, when I got married, we stayed at somebody's house here in Manchester, to remain nameless, but somebody was quite well known and quite well off. And I remember the door went, and my brother opened up the door, and standing there was a collector asking for charity. And the wife of the house came, shut the door on his face, and said to my brother, Akiva, in this house, we don't just open up the door to anyone. And he was like, what? My father's always opened up the door to everyone. Like, he couldn't understand it, especially if you're looking at such a wealthy family. So give him a tenner. It's not going to cost, It's much easier for you to give them a tenner than it is for me to give them a 50p voucher. Just go for it. What's the big deal? So what? So somebody rang on your bell. Just give them the money. Like, I had never seen anybody slam the door on someone's face who hadn't even done it. I've seen people do it. Like, sometimes you get the obnoxious collectors. Have you ever had an obnoxious collector at your door?
Oh, I should say so. Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
all the
So
same. So
those
we
are the people you want to sort of like shut the door on. But this guy wasn't obnoxious. He just stood there and he said, "Hi, I'm here collecting. I'm needy. I'm here collecting." And the door went poof, right in his face. And you're like, "This is a
but
huge
but
house.
but
How
what
did he
was the
just? What did I
but
just
what
do?"
was but what's the basis for that? What was the backup of that? That it
Well,
wasn't her
it
being
wasn't really
mean.
for us to ask this lady why she felt they didn't. I think the point is because if they open up the door, they'll have to keep on opening up the door day and night because they'll just get hassled and harassed by so many people that it's very, very difficult. And it's true that wealthy people do get harassed a lot more for charity. And I know my mother had some very wealthy
Never.
friends, and they said no matter how much you give, nobody's ever happy with what you give them because they look and you go, you got hundreds of millions of pounds. You gave me 1,000 quid. That's nothing to you. So if I give 1,000 quid, everyone would say, Rabbi, where'd you come up with that money from? But you speak to, yeah, you would. Yeah.
Yeah,
But if
yeah,
somebody
no.
else gives 1,000 quid, they'd be like, where where'd that come from? Why is that so little? You got so much more money.
And we've
Here we go.
increased. So Leo today has had a great time picking up litter on Kings Road with Kate and the JMH team. And thanks to all involved, including Berry Council. So
Well,
you know
thank you to
what?
Kate and to Jam and to Leo and everybody else that was involved in that. I think Kings Road needs a real cleanup anyway.
It
I think
really,
that's besides it. I think that's a separate discussion. I think if you really want to do something on Mitzvah Day, teach the kids not to throw the litter rather than picking it up. Because give it another 2 weeks and it'll be full of litter again. I'd love to teach the kids in our area that the floor is not a bin.
But don't their parents teach them that?
I've been to a lot of their houses, and most of their houses are quite clean. I don't know why. It's very strange. Like, I had that with somebody in my class. They once threw something on the floor, and I said, "Do you do that at home?" He's like, "No, my mother would never let me." I said, "What makes you think that it's acceptable in the classroom? Why do you think your coat goes on the floor?" Like, I can't remember what it was. They literally just took something that didn't belong on the floor and just chucked it on the floor. I was like,
It is a disgusting thing to do. It's an awful thing to do. You would never. I mean, I've been in traffic behind people, and they have thrown things out of the window as they're passing. I think littering is it's a horrible thing because it forget about social
you're
action.
inconveniencing everybody.
It's not just inconveniencing; it makes the world a dirtier place to live in.
Absolutely.
It's
I mean,
it's
I grew up. I don't know. Remember, I
unsanitary.
don't know what it was like in England, but I grew up when I grew up in Vienna. You didn't have to pick up after your dog.
Yeah, well, you didn't have to.
You did not have to pick up after your dog. And I distinctly remember stepping so many times in other people's, dog muck, and just think to yourself, like, did you really have to? Now I understand. Okay, the dog needs a place to go to the toilet, but you have to just leave it there.
I remember going to visit I think I had a flight, and this is as a teenager, flight that stopped at Swiss Air, so it stopped in Zurich, and I was stuck there for I think something like 8 hours in the end, and so they let me out of the airport, and I've never seen anywhere as clean as that because let's face it, the streets here in England, well, particularly Manchester, if you were to walk down Very New Road, it is awash with litter sometimes. It is ridiculous. It must be coming from somewhere.
Yeah,
People are doing it. There's enough
yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
doing it, and
It's
so
funny. I don't always find it as bad. But I find it now at this point when there's all the leaves around. It's just until all the leaves have fallen off the trees, that the whole area just looks like one big tip.
yeah.
It's God's tip this time. Nobody's littered it, but it is a tip.
But
Yeah,
so I think so. The act that they've done today in picking up that litter does make Kings Road a better place to live in.
it does absolutely, and that's why I said I think they deserve a thank you for having done that. I don't think Leo or Kate were the ones that dropped that litter, so it wasn't really their responsibility to go around and pick up that litter. And yet they said, as social action and social responsibility, we want our neighborhoods to look cleaner. We don't want Kings Road to look like a tip. And even though some kids think it's okay or some adults think it's okay to just chuck things on the floor, we will go out and we will clean it and will make that difference. So, which is why I say I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm not against the fact that they picked up the litter. I think it's just the idea or the concept of Mitzvah Day is the reason some people are a little bit against it is because the usage of the word mitzvah has become synonymous with social action and is very much a non-religious concept rather than understanding these Jewish concepts through the prism of the way the Torah wants to look at them. But that doesn't make them bad. I guess I think the funny thing about the whole thing is that if, like you said, if Mitzvah Day was called something else, I don't think anybody would be against it. Even the more religious side. I think it's only because they call it mitzvah and that makes it confusing, right? And that's where people start get their backs up. If we called it Jewish Social Action Day, so you know what? I don't think there'd be a rabbi out there go for it. Jewish social action, do it.
But you know what? To Jews like me, if you to say to me, Sunday is Mitzvah Day, I'm not going to tell you anything else about it, David. You need to work out what Mitzvah Day is. I would instantly assume that Mitzvah Day, because of my concept of generally what a mitzvah is, I would assume that mitzvah actually does mean social action, that actually does mean doing good things and good deeds, and that I would fill that day however I could doing things that help people. And I don't think, I'm not one of these people that thinks that it means more to help people within your own community than outside of your community. I think we're all, in that respect, I see everybody as fairly equal. I do a lot within my community because that's just, it's where I am. It's on my doorstep, and it's like a sort of a family, if you like. So you start at home and work outwards. But I think a lot of people are like that,
a lot
aren't
of people view it. It's
and
like starting with family and working outwards. It's not because people on the outside are no good, but I'll always go the extra mile for my brother and my sister.
But let's just skip back to tzedakah very quickly, because I think if we could give a few last messages before we go away, there is in halacha a whole discussion of there's a hierarchy of needs when it comes to halacha, when it comes to tzedakah, as to what kind of tzedakah is more meaningful than another, and where you should start, and that's saying that charity begins at home. That's where it all comes from, right?
So I'm not sure. I don't know now at the moment. I couldn't tell you by heart the different hierarchy of what's more important, what less important is in tzedakah. What I could say is that the Torah views giving tzedakah quietly, meaning that you don't know who it goes to, and the person who gets it doesn't know who it came from, is the highest form of tzedakah. Because part of tzedakah is retaining the dignity, if you'd like, the honor, the respect of the recipient.
Dignity.
Nobody wants to receive a handout. Nobody is happy to receive a handout. Do you know what I mean? And I was speaking to my sister about it recently, and she said to me that she knows someone where when they come for tzedakah, the husband gets all uptight. Why don't you go out to work? It's like there are a lot of people out there that are working very, very hard and still aren't making ends meet.
And it's simply not for us to judge.
It's not for us to judge. And somebody's coming here and says, "Please help me," So if the guy says, "Please help me," you say to him, "Well, what are you doing?" He says, "I don't do anything with my life. I collect my unemployment check, and it just doesn't cover everything." So you're like, "Well, if you got yourself some employment, chances are you do a little bit better, right?" But again, he's not coming to you for advice. You're not the Citizens Advice Bureau. He's asking for money.
I'll tell you something. I've had this discussion a few times this week about not necessarily about tzedakah, but people with financial hardship. Poverty, in any sense of the word, you don't need to be on the street to feel financial hardship. But it hurts. It's stressful. It's immensely stressful. It puts you under strain.
And it does hurt because you want to give your kids and you want to give your family, and you can't.
And I'll tell you something. The people that need it they don't want to ask for it because they would rather do without it. I honestly believe that genuine cases like that, there's nobody out there scrounging and taking things that are not necessarily they're entitled to, because we all want a life of of dignity, and we all want to be able to get through it, meet all our obligations with no issues and no problems. But life ain't like that.
No,
It
it's not.
simply isn't like that. For a lot of people, it's not like that.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. And they could be the people that live next door to you, and you would never know it. You would never know it. Do you know what I
Yep.
mean? And I mean, it's interesting. I have a friend of mine that on many occasions has gotten in touch with me and said, "Look, I'm waiting for a check to come through in 3 days. Can you lend me £200? I'll give it back to you in 2 days." And I've done it quite a few times, and so much so that when I went to take out a mortgage, the mortgage company asked me, "Who's this guy you keep on paying?" I'm like, "Look, he sends the money back every few days." So that they didn't, so they let go of it. But it could just be something as simple as that.
Yeah.
And that, they've not really, this person has never ever taken money from me. I've always gotten my money back. But even the mere fact that I'm able to lend them £200-300 when they're in a bind, 4 or 5 days for 10 days, and then they give it back to me, makes all the difference in the world to somebody who is on the brink of his account going bank. Do you know what I mean?
You know what? I think we're spoiled basically with when it comes to mitzvahs and acts of chesed and gemilas chasadim and everything. We have several times a year in our Jewish calendar where we're encouraged to do. I mean, Purim, for instance, is all
amazing.
It's all about that, right? It's a day of giving.
And I think people, if they find out the sheer numbers of what goes on Purim in our communities, it's mind blowing. It's staggering that on Purim, for example, Rav Simcha Bamberger collected, it was one of the charities collected last year, £350,000 just from different shuls that went around collecting for him. And that's just one charity. People are giving out tens of thousands of pounds on one day. It's unbelievable. It really is. And as you said, charity's but charity's a lot of that. Again, as I said, it's a lot about that dignity. So if I give charity and I don't know who it goes to, and the person receives it and he doesn't know who he got it from, it means when he comes to shul, he doesn't have to look around and go, "Oh, he's sitting over there. He's probably looking in my direction," and thinking to himself, "I know he got money from me." Yeah.
But
it's a very comfortable feeling knowing that you're in somebody else's pocket.
So that's we're talking about money there. Well, the one thing about Mitzvah Day that I do like a lot. I mean, look, there's a lot to like, and I don't think that one day a year hurts anybody, particularly in terms of giving out this kind of. Even if that is the message that they take away about Judaism, that we do these sort of things, then gesund to hate. Why not? But they should also know it's a daily occurrence. But I think that the one thing that I do like about it is that it's talking about giving one's time rather than one's money. And I actually
really like, by the way.
And I love that because I think that's one of the things that we struggle with, and we've had this discussion a lot when it comes to shul or organizations as a whole. Let's maybe not talk about shul or our shul necessarily, but it is hard to get people with all the obligations and calls on their time these days. It's hard to find people who genuinely want to step up and do things, be doers. It's not about being
time.
not
but I
necessarily
think that's the amazing thing, that there are people out there who give their time, and to me, that not everybody, but almost everybody's got time. Anybody can say to you, "Look, I don't have the money. What do you want from me? You want me to build you a new shul? You want me to redo your kitchens? You want me to whatever it is, that we need doing in the shul? I don't have 50 grand. I don't have 100 grand to give you. All right. Would you come on the committee to help us out and do that? Yeah, come, And then if the answer there is no, that makes you feel like, but time everybody's got. Time already is more a question of, and it doesn't have to be my charity. If somebody says, "Look, I'm involved in charity work."
Rabbi, wait. I feel like it's sermon time because you had an incident this week where you ran out of time, and we talked about how we could use that time. Let's face it, we're not all. That is actually something that you cannot buy another second of in this life, right?
No,
you've got the time that you've got. And it is, and to me, I think money you can lose and you can make, and you'll be rich, you can be poor, you can change things around. It's all up and down, but time is short. Let's face it.
Yeah,
it's running out, and I think those people that give their time to for the good of other people. I think, I think, wow, I just think we need more of them. That's all.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely. You
more
know,
of
it's
them.
interesting. We were recently discussing for a certain charity that I'm involved with, finding more people that are willing to give their time. And we basically said, you need to look younger sometimes, because I find if you look like in the 45 to 50-year-old bracket, people have already chosen their charities. And those people that are willing to give and are willing to really, strap down and give their time have chosen their charities and are giving their time already. And those that haven't at this point chosen something to give to, chances are you won't be able to coax them into giving their time for anything else either.
Yeah. You need to pick a team. Okay, look, we've been going for over an hour now, and I think we've chatted the concept of mitzvahs well and truly through, and it's interesting, and I'm very grateful to everybody that took part in today, because I ultimately I think. I don't know whether these people know that it's something Jewish or not. I think that it does make the world seem like a slightly better place than it was 10
Mhm.
minutes ago. So to me, I think that's a good thing. But I just want to remind you all that you have another 364 mitzvah days to go this year. You
There
can
we
do this
go. Keep on
every
giving, keep
day.
on doing. Keep on giving, keep on doing. God doesn't stop, and we don't stop. We don't rest. We got, as you said, you have 365 days in the year. Every day is a mitzvah day. Make the most of every day. You can do social action tomorrow. You can come to davening tomorrow. There's lots of different mitzvahs you can do. Choose a whole wide portfolio of different things that you want to do, and make mitzvahs part of the way you live.
Oh, man. And on that note, we're going to wish you a good week, and we will see you again soon.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.